Hello everyone, this is Mack, Whiskey 4 Alpha X-Ray, and today I'd like to introduce you to the TunerGenius XL from FlexRadio. But before I do that, let me first offer a disclaimer that this unit has not been certified by the Federal Communications Commission yet. We expect that this quarter, so I won't be able to announce pricing yet, but we are taking pre-orders, which I'll discuss in a later slide. Let's begin by looking at some of the key specifications, and I know there are a lot of them here, but hams always like to know what's behind the hardware. So one of the key things about this tuner is that it can either be operated fully automatically or in a manual mode. It does use a Pi network, and it does cover continuously 1.8 megahertz to 54 megahertz. So that means if you're a Mars operator or have some other reason to operate outside the ham radio bands, this tuner will service you. Here's a very exciting feature of the TunerGenius XL. It supports every radio interface a ham radio operator could ever need. Local area network, RS-232, the ICOM CIV, binary coded decimal, pin to band. It will even do RF sensing if you have a vintage radio like many of mine and you don't have a radio interface on that radio. So essentially it will work with any radio out there. Of course, it's fully protected against failures in your antenna system or even user errors. It will match up to 10-to-1 SWR. It will typically tune within 2 to 12 seconds. I'll show you a video of that a little later. And it will switch between stored memory locations within 15 milliseconds. These tuning solutions are stored by segment, by band. And of course, if you want to tweak in your tuning solution, you always have the option to do that from either the front panel controls or the Windows application. It will tune with any power level from 10 watts to 200 watts. And it features a large 4.5-inch color screen display that is touch sensitive so that you can control all functions from the front panel of the TunerGenius. Here's an exciting feature. You no longer need to purchase a separate watt meter for your shack or a separate SWR meter. That is now integrated into a high accuracy RF power and SWR meter that works in both operate and bypass modes of the tuner. And of course, it will operate up to 2,000 watts ICAS. This thing is built like a tank to broadcast standards. Here are just a few more of the key characteristics of the tuner. The nominal impedance is 50 ohms, so it's well suited for ham radio applications. I've talked to you about the power level and the duty cycle. It does have full protection, and I've talked to you about the watt meter. Here's another exciting feature of the tuner. It's offered in two different versions. A 1x3 version, that is 1 input and 3 outputs that are switchable and can be remembered via an antenna matrix so that those antennas are selected automatically by frequency or by band. And this is also the only single operator 2 radio tuner on the market. It offers 2 inputs and 2 outputs. It is perfectly matched to the PowerGenius XL. And you can do full SO2R operations with this tuner. This allows you, if you're doing SO2R and you need tuners, this allows you to replace 2 existing tuners with one TunerGenius XL. Of course, it comes with its own supply power, but it will also operate off of shack power. Let's take a look at the front panel because there are many controls here, and many of them are dual function. I won't try to go in a super amount of detail, but I will share that on the front panel is a bypass operate button, and also an opportunity to tune with a single press or with a long press, switch from manual to auto operation. You see the power and SWR meter. This power meter scales up to 2,000 watts as the power changes within the tuner. And you will see all of the current communications configurations here on both the A and B screen. Here is the Pi network, C1, L, and C2. You can see these are all at 0 value right now. I'll show you in a moment how this works in real life. And those can be controlled from these knobs here. These knobs also have a press function to offer different functionality that I won't cover in this presentation. Now let's look at the business end, the back end of the TunerGenius. This is the single operator 2 radio version. You'll see there's an A section with a drive and an output, and a B section with a drive and an output. Perfectly matched again to a Power Genius XL, though this will work with 2 of your own linear amplifiers or 2 different radios if you have those that you're not using a linear. This is where all of the connectivity to various radios starts. If you're using a FlexRadio, any of the 6000 series of FlexRadios, using local area network, a single Ethernet cable is the only communications connection needed to this tuner. But if you are using CAT, here is a CAT A input for the A side of the tuner and a CAT B input for the B side of the tuner. Here is for band data, either BCD or pin to band, that is, select a certain pin for that band. And here are the 2 ports for the ICOM CIV. Of course, push-to-talk circuits exist for both halves of the tuner. But again, you do not need to use any of these connections when using a FlexRadio 6000 series. You only use the LAN port. Let's take a look just at a static screenshot of the TunerGenius XL desktop application. This is the one that I have here in my shack. So I'm pretty familiar with it. That's why it says Atlanta. And what this shows is it's connected to a Flex 6600 radio, 6600 radio. And every function that I showed you on the front panel can also be controlled from this application. The Windows computer software allows the TunerGenius to be placed off the desktop. So in my case, I have an antenna entry point outside my shack that's environmentally controlled and conditioned. And I have the TunerGenius sitting on top of the Power Genius XL amplifier, and I'm able to control all functions from a desktop application for the TunerGenius. I've mentioned it does have a high precision peak responding RF power and SWR meter, and that means you really need no longer to have your own separate power and SWR meter within your shack. Again, all of the functions are available here. You see the power meters. You see that I have it set up so that right now it's working on 40 meters at 7203 kilohertz. It's in the operate mode. You can see the C1, L, and C2, where those are sitting within the tuner, and you can move it from standby to bypass to tune just with the press of a button on the application. Let's look at how it integrates with the FlexRadio 6000 series. This is from the setup screen, and you see FlexRadio here at the top. It shows that I have both port A and port B enabled. This is the serial number of my radio. And I have port A selected to antenna 1 and port B selected to transmit antenna 2. And I'm using LAN for the communications protocol. And that's all there is to set up a FlexRadio. I think it's important to know that FlexRadio and 403A have offered an open source application programming interface so that you can make this work with Node-RED or any other application you have or that you want to write. And it's also important to note that unlike some manufacturers, all of the communications protocols are not proprietary, and so you can easily write your own applications. And as I've said a couple of times, it does support full single operator 2 radio operation with the Power Genius XL amplifier. Let's look at how it might interface with other exciters. We've tested every other exciter that we can reasonably think of. But radio interfaces, all of the ones are supported that I've previously discussed. And it also supports RF sensing if you have a legacy radio. So this is showing a Kenwood type of protocol or a Kenwood radio. All you would do is select enabled, the baud rate, and the stop parity bits, the number of data bits, the parity, and the number of stop bits for each port. Run a push-to-talk cable out there and a serial cable out to the BCD port, and you're in business. Here's something that's very exciting about the TunerGenius XL. It's fully integrated with the Antenna Genius antenna switching system. So here at my QTH, I have a 2x8 Antenna Genius. And what this allows you to have, and I'll demonstrate this in the video in a moment, is it allows you to have unique tuning solutions for up to 4 antennas per band per output port. Now that I know that could be a little confusing, but what it really is saying is if you have multiple antennas that work on a single band, you can assign those antennas and their tuning solution to the TunerGenius, so that when you switch antennas, that tuning solution for those antennas follows that. And of course, that allows very rapid antenna changes when you, without needing to retune an antenna match when changing antennas. Another exciting feature of the TunerGenius XL is that it can be set to bypass in any frequency range. Here you see that I have it set to bypass in 40 meters from 7200 kilohertz to 7203 kilohertz. And this is the, I'm using a step IR, and I was just testing them in this range. Once it goes to outside of 7200 to 7203 kilohertz, the TunerGenius solution will then come back into play and be automatically selected. It will move from bypass to operate. Also, this was a feature request from one of the users. So if you have a multi-band antenna and you want to use that in receiving, so that on a FlexRadio you can receive multiple bands simultaneously. So let me give you an example. Here I have a Mosley 7-band beam that I use primarily for receiving. And that allows me to monitor those 7 bands on a FlexRadio simultaneously, see what's happening on those bands while operating. But you don't want a tuner inline when you're using it in a receive mode. So if you simply check the port that that antenna is on, or both ports, the tuner will automatically go to bypass when you're not transmitting, so that the tuner is not affecting the performance of the receive antenna. Let's first look at a normal tuning operation. You see a 160 meter antenna that has been selected. This antenna is an inverted L, which is normally resonant in the lower CW portion of the band. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to tune it at 1.95 megahertz in the phone portion of the band, just to show you how quickly the TunerGenius will tune. I guess that was maybe 1 second, maybe 2 seconds, but you see it has now found a tuning solution in the phone portion of the band. And the SWR is about 1.14 to 1. Now let's look at the automatic bypass function of the TunerGenius XL. If you have an antenna which has a resonant portion within a band, the TunerGenius can automatically enter bypass mode over a predefined frequency range. If you look, I have the TunerGenius, in this case as an example, set up to bypass from 7.2 megahertz to 7.203 megahertz. This is just an example. So once I do that, You see that I'm sitting at 7.197. Watch this frequency change color as I tune through 7.2. You see it automatically entered bypass. I continued to increase, came out of 7203. It went back to operate. Now let's examine the extensibility you have when used with the Antenna Genius. So if you look closely at the Antenna Genius application here, or applet, you'll see that there are 3 antennas that are possible to use on 40 meters. We're currently on 7205.3. There's a step IR antenna that's available and selected. There is a Tower 4 antenna, which is a Cushcraft 40-meter beam, and there is a Mosley 7-element beam that covers 40 meters. So using the Antenna Genius, I can quickly select between any of those 3 antennas, and the TunerGenius will have the correct tuning solution. So while I'm doing this, first look at the 2 capacitors and the inductor in the middle on the TunerGenius application. You see on the step IR, it did a little touch up on the step IR. When I go to the Cushcraft, you notice those settings changed, and it also showed that I'm on antenna 2 on the Antenna Genius. So that's the new tuning solution for that Cushcraft. And if I go to the Mosley, you see again, the tuning solution changed automatically within a few milliseconds, and it shows that I'm on antenna 8. So with this extensibility, it greatly expands your possibilities for using a tuner with multiple antennas and being able to quickly have the correct tuning solution. So as I've said, we're not allowed to offer pricing yet. We do know the pricing. We'll announce it just as soon as we have FCC certification. We've already begun shipping beta units to customers for final acceptance testing. We want to be sure this thing is bulletproof when it goes to the field. And the TunerGenius XL, as all FlexRadio products, are the only ham radio products offered with a standard 2-year warranty once they become available. Let me take any questions you may have at this time.